Please state your full name and date of birth.
James Bigglesworth, 16th of the 12th, 1984.
The direct interview.
Hello, aviation testing.
Oh, good afternoon.
My name is Peter, and of course I'm going to ask you some questions about flying, but I'm not an expert in aviation, so you need to talk about these topics with me in everyday English, okay?
Sure, understand. And can I just ask first, you can hear me okay?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, fantastic.
Very clear. Now, do you have any questions before we start?
No, I don't think so.
Now, I just need to ask you one or two questions about yourself. Are you a licensed pilot?
No, I've currently got a student pilot's license and currently training towards becoming a pilot.
So what kind of license are you training for?
A private pilot's license.
Will you go on and do a commercial license?
Not sure at this stage, possibly, but...
Sure. And when will you take your exam for the license?
I'm hoping by the end of summer, so within the next 4 months. I've done one exam, and I need to do the other exams in the near future.
Right. What's the one that you've done?
The radio exam.
And how did that go?
Good. I did. I think I got about 93, 94%, but that was 18 months ago I sat that, and I've just been inundated with work. I'm an independent contractor, and so it's a fair way a long time ago. So I've got until March actually until that expires, and so that's the aim is to get the other ones completed by March, and then I'll be okay. But we'll see.
Now, what about the actual flying? Can you tell me about the type of aircraft that you've been learning to fly in?
I own a Piper Tomahawk. It's leased to the Kapiti Aero Club, and flown that. I've also flown the Cessna 152, 172, various types of light aircraft over the years. Being involved in aviation, I've done a lot of flying, but never formalised it. But at the moment, and currently, it's the Piper Tomahawk.
Right. And can you tell me something about the Tomahawk, and how does it compare with the other planes?
The Piper Tomahawk, it's a 1979 model, a two-seater trainer, mainly produced by Piper to compete with the 152, I understand. It's a low-wing aircraft. It's got a lot more room in the aircraft than the 152. It's got more of an open cockpit, better visibility, and about 110 horsepower engine powering it, and gets along between 90 and 100 knots. So
sounds like a good training aircraft, is it?
Yeah, it is. It's a great. They say it's a bit like the Holden versus Ford argument. Some people love the Cessna, some people love the Piper. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to ask you about some routine flight procedures. Can you tell me what a cold front is, and how does it affect flying?
Yeah, a little bit out of my technical knowledge. It's just from a layman's point of view.
Sure, that's fine.
A cold front is a build-up of weather that, as I understand it, produces rain and cold temperatures. You might get icing, and it would be something to avoid when flying. So I haven't done the meteorology exam yet or studied for it, but I do understand it would be something to avoid. Right.
When you say something to avoid, are they all to be avoided, or are there some really bad cold fronts and others that maybe are not so dangerous?
Not sure what the grading of them. The cold front, once again in layman's terms, would be bad weather, and that might be a precursor for a storm, cumulus nimbus type clouds, the thunder type clouds. But a cold front, it's a layman's description, and I'd have to, you do some research on that before I
Yeah,
give you
yeah, of course. Now, what about other aspects of weather that affect flying? For example, winds. Do you know anything about the effect of winds and how careful you need to be as a pilot?
Yeah, the winds. You'd have to. There's a very important consideration to think about. Winds, crosswinds and actual just wind strength would affect flying, and each aircraft would have its limitations in that regard.
Yeah. Now, I understand that aircraft always take off and land into the wind. Can you explain what the reason for that is?
Quite simply, it slows your ground speed or your landing speed by going into the wind. So if the wind was, 20 knots as a headwind, it would effectively reduce your landing speed by 20 knots. So make for a much safer landing.
Yep. Okay, and what about crosswinds? I've heard that they can be particularly dangerous. Do you know anything about that?
Well, a crosswind comes from either, from left or right side, and it effectively wants to push the aircraft sideways off the runway. So you have to counter that with ailerons and keep it straight with the rudder. And there's a limit to how much crosswind that you can correct for by the use of your controls. So landing with a crosswind is quite achievable, but each aircraft has its limitations in regards to that.
Have you experienced that, strong crosswinds?
Yes, I have, yeah.
And how did you cope?
Well, it's all practice, Peter, and basically on approach you use your aileron, so you roll the aircraft into the direction of the wind, but at the same time you're applying the opposite rudder to keep it straight down the runway.
Yeah, that sounds quite difficult.
Yeah, it's something. It's like patting your head and rubbing your stomach at the same time. It's sort of you've got to practice. Yeah.
Now, I'd like to ask you about emergencies and flight safety. Imagine that while taxiing an aeroplane, you notice that it continuously pulls to the left and the ride has become very bumpy. What do you think is causing this, and what actions would you take?
Firstly, I would suspect a flat tyre, and which would cause a lot of drag on that side, and also the bumps of the ground would be, or the contours of the ground would be felt through the wheel because it's lost the inflation of the tyre. I'd be stopping immediately. It's not something that would possibly cause injury, and if you had to continue taxiing to avoid an obstacle or get out of the way of a landing aircraft, I would consider doing that, but I would be stopping as soon as I can to avoid too much damage to the aeroplane.
Right. And when you find a problem, for example, a flat tire while taxiing, or some problem with the fuel and the pre-flight check, what do you do? Who can you report that to?
Well, as a student pilot, I'd be mentioning it to the instructor or the CFI of the Aero Club, but ultimately the licensed aircraft engineer would need to be notified before you flew it. With any concerns mechanically, you need to report it to a licensed engineer, and he'd need to rectify that before flight. And that would involve, if it's a defect, to actually write the defect in the tech log, and it becomes an open defect for the licensed engineer to rectify and certify. Are there no things that you can rectify yourself as a pilot? Yes, there is, as long as you've been suitably trained, but Part 43 Appendix A actually lists the tasks a pilot can do, and there are quite a few. For example, changing the tyre, lubricating, things like that possibly a little bit too much for some, but as long as you've been suitably trained by a licensed engineer, you can carry those tasks out.
So that's not for a student pilot, I presume.
No, not as a rule. There would be exceptions, and certainly student pilots that are quite proficient, for example, been in the industry, or maybe a tradesman engineer might be certified by an engineer to carry them out. But as I understand it, the rule says that you need to be a private pilot as the minimum. Yeah.
Now, Neil, in the future, what type of aircraft would you really like to fly? Do you have a dream aircraft?
Not particularly. There's a few different aircraft that would be great to have a go at, but really I'm just my Tomahawk, the best aircraft you could ever have, having only one. But say a Cessna 172, maybe some of the fighter aircraft, the Mustang, Spitfire would be quite good to have a go at, but really I'm just happy with the light aircraft.
Sure. You don't want a big jet.
No, I'm not. I'm a bit long.
Okay, Neil, well, that's the end of the interview, so thanks for taking part. Now, please stay on the line and you'll automatically be connected to the second part of the test, okay?
Okay, thanks very much, Peter.
My pleasure. All the best to you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Let's begin with part 1. You will shortly be asked to speak naturally for 30 seconds on an aviation topic. Speak continuously on the topic until you are interrupted. Let's begin.
What do you like most about flying?
The freedom of flying from A to B. It's a discipline that requires training, concentration. There's a huge level of enjoyment and satisfaction from flying, but it also requires careful consideration. You can't be distracted. And also the scenery. It's a completely different...
Now we move to part 2. In this section, you will be asked questions on specific aspects of aviation. Your response should be longer than those in part 1, about 40 to 45 seconds for each one. Let's begin.
Explain to someone who is not a pilot what visual flight rules means.
Visual flight rules, or VFR, involves the rules around flying in clear air, not through cloud. It's the opposite of instrument flight rules, which involves aircraft flying with no visibility through cloud. So visual flight rules are contained in Part 91 of the CAA rules and covers the flying in clear air. And these things involve, those rules about visual flight rules is things like airport approaches.
Explain to someone who is not a pilot what Mayday is.
Mayday is a radio call that is made when there is an immediate need for assistance. There would be an emergency situation, for example, an engine failure, loss of control, fire, a number of things that can happen in the air and on the ground as well. So the radio call is made, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday 3 times, and anyone on that frequency can respond and help as need be. So
Imagine you are flying and your co-pilot or passenger is feeling unwell. Explain what you would do.
I would provide a sick bag for them in case they were to vomit. Just make sure they're comfortable. Ask about their condition, and if need be, land as soon as possible. Obviously, it's not always appropriate to land straight away, so we'll pick the nearest airfield and man, but I'd keep them talking and try to distract them from their illness. At the same time, obviously, flying the aircraft is the number one important task at hand.
Now, part 3. You will need to give air traffic control an explanation of an urgent situation. Your response should be short, with a maximum time of 20 seconds. Let's begin.
You have just taken off and the cabin door opens. Explain the problem to air traffic control. You have 20 seconds to do it.
Air traffic control, Tango Delta Lima, taking off runway 34. Our door has come ajar. We request an immediate return to the airport via the circuit. We still are under control, but...
Now we move to part 4. There will now follow a sample of typical aviation radio exchanges. Please listen carefully to the exchanges and give your response at the end of each question. Your response should be short, with a maximum time of 20 seconds. Let's begin.
And Vulcan traffic in the Gamston overhead is a Cessna 150, maintaining 3,000 feet in the hold.
Local copy.
Delta Lima Yankee, traffic 4 miles south of Gamston, north westbound, inbound to the field at Doncaster, is a Vulcan medium aircraft.
Lima Yankee copied and looking.
The joining Vulcan aircraft is notified of traffic, a Cessna 150. What altitude is the Cessna?
Flying at 3,000 feet.
As the pilot in this situation, describe one thing that could go wrong and explain what you would do about it.
Not getting the correct traffic information and flying into the path of either the Cessna 150 or the Falcon. Very important to avoid traffic and to listen to the air.
All finished. We really appreciate you taking the time to complete this assessment. Goodbye.